Ever been caught completely off guard by something unexpected? Something that flips your world upside down in the best possible way? That's exactly what happened to me at the gym. It was the day after a major holiday. The kind where people were still recovering from their celebrations. Leaving the gym practically deserted. I liked it that way. No waiting for machines. No groups of people crowding the space. Just the sound of my own breathing and the rhythmic clang of weights. The usual high-energy buzz of the gym was absent, replaced by a calm, almost intimate stillness. After finishing a tough set of bench presses, I sat up, wiping sweat from my forehead. And that's when I saw him. He wasn't lifting weights or running on the treadmill like the few other gym goers. He was working, a janitor dressed in dark work pants and a fitted gray t-shirt, pushing a mop slowly across the floor near the mirrors. He was older than me. Maybe late 30s or early 40s. But he carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from years of knowing his own strength. I wouldn't have paid much attention if not for the way he moved, strong, deliberate, with the quiet power of someone who was used to physical labor. His short, graying hair gave him a rugged charm. And his arms, thick and veined, flexed subtly as he wrung out the mop. There was something undeniably masculine about him. Something raw and real. So different from the younger guys in the gym who spent half their time taking mirror selfies. For a second, I was caught staring. Then, as if he could feel my gaze, he looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine through the mirror's reflection. My stomach tensed, my heartbeat stuttering just a little at the intensity of his gaze. It wasn't just a glance. It was a pause, a brief moment where something unspoken passed between us. His eyes held mine for just a second too long before he looked away, going back to his work as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. I tried to shake it off and continued my workout. But I couldn't ignore his presence. Every time I moved to a new machine, he seemed to be working nearby, wiping down benches, refilling cleaning supplies, or pushing his cart past me. Was it a coincidence, or was he noticing me too? The possibility sent a quiet thrill through me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. As I moved to the pull-up bar, I stole another glance in his direction. He was wiping down the mirrors now, his broad shoulders shifting under the snug fabric of his shirt. He worked methodically, but every so often I caught him glancing back, just briefly, just enough to make my skin tingle with awareness. By the time I was finishing up my last set of squats, the gym had grown even quieter. Most of the few people left had trickled out, leaving only me, one other guy on a treadmill, and the janitor. The atmosphere had shifted. It felt more secluded, more private. I grabbed my towel and headed toward the restroom to splash some cold water on my face. The moment I stepped inside, the coolness of the tiles and the distant hum of the ventilation system made me pause. I gripped the edges of the sink, looking at my reflection in the mirror. My chest was rising and falling steadily, my body still buzzing from the workout, but also from something else. I still felt his eyes on me, lingering, even though he was nowhere in sight. That was the first time I let myself admit that I wanted him to notice me. The cool water felt good against my skin as I splashed it over my face, washing away the sweat but doing little to settle the heat building inside me. I gripped the edge of the sink, taking a deep breath, trying to push away the restless energy still buzzing in my chest. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on just finishing my routine and leaving, I couldn't ignore the way my body felt, aware, charged, alive. I straightened up, running a hand through my damp hair, when I caught movement from the corner of my eye. It was him, the janitor, in the doorway of the restroom, pushing his cleaning cart inside. My stomach tightened involuntarily. He wasn't looking at me directly, but I could feel the awareness between us, the heavy silence stretching in the air. I turned toward the mirror, pretending to fix my hair, watching him through the reflection. He moved with slow confidence, unfazed, wiping down the counters just a few feet away. The scent of his cleaning spray mixed with the faint musk of sweat and something else. Something distinctly him, and I swallowed hard. "Slow night," he murmured, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the quiet. I nodded, gripping the counter a little tighter than necessary. "Yeah, guess everyone's still recovering from the holiday." He hummed in agreement, his eyes flickering up, meeting mine in the mirror for just a second before dropping back down to his work. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. It made my pulse quicken. There was something about him, His quiet presence, the way he carried himself, the way he looked at me. Like he knew I'd been watching him, knew that something was shifting between us. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to move. "Well, see you around," I said, grabbing my towel and heading for the locker room before I did something reckless, like stay there just to see if he'd keep watching me. I tried to shake off the tension as I walked, telling myself it was just in my head, just misplaced energy from a long workout, just an overactive imagination. But the moment I stepped into the locker room, my body still damp from sweat, still humming from the earlier tension, I realized it wasn't over. The locker room was empty, just like the rest of the gym. Rows of metal lockers stretched in both directions, their dull gray doors reflecting the dim overhead lights. The only sound was the faint hum of the ventilation system, a steady rhythm that filled the quiet space. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders, trying to shake off the strange tension still clinging to me. I draped my towel over a bench, pulled off my damp tank top, and tossed it onto my gym bag. My skin was still warm from the workout, beads of sweat lingering along my collarbone and the curve of my back. I needed a shower. Maybe the heat of the water would do what my attempts at logic couldn't: clear my head. I made my way toward the showers, my footsteps echoing slightly against the tile floor. The water came on with a twist of the knob, steam rising instantly as the hot stream pounded against the tiled walls. I stepped under it, letting the warmth roll over my tense muscles, my head tipping back as I exhaled slowly. I tried not to think about him, tried not to think about the way his gaze had lingered just a little too long, or how his voice had wrapped around me like smoke, deep and smooth. Tried not to picture the way his arms flexed as he worked, the quiet confidence in his movements, the intensity in his eyes when they met mine. But trying not to think about something only made it worse. I dragged a hand down my face, forcing myself to focus on the sensation of the water, the weight of exhaustion settling into my limbs. Eventually, I turned off the shower, running a hand through my damp hair as I reached for my towel. Wrapping it loosely around my waist, I stepped out into the open locker area, heading toward my things, and then I saw him standing just inside the locker room entrance. His cleaning cart parked beside him. It was Reggie, the janitor. His dark eyes flicked over me quickly before settling on my face. Unreadable, steady. I froze for half a second, gripping my towel instinctively, pulse hammering against my ribs. "Didn't mean to interrupt," he said casually, though something in his voice held a weight that made my skin prickle. I forced a small, breathless chuckle, shifting my stance. "It's your job, right?" He smirked slightly, stepping further inside, his gaze lingering just a second too long as he pushed the cart forward. "That it is." For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt thick, charged with something unspoken. The locker room, normally just another part of my routine, suddenly felt different, smaller, more intimate, the walls pressing in just enough to make my breath shallow. And then it happened. The towel around my waist, already loose from my hurried grip, slipped. It hit the tile floor with a soft, barely there sound, but the impact it had was far greater. Reggie's eyes darkened slightly, his gaze flicking downward before snapping back up to meet mine. I felt my entire body tense, heat rushing to my skin in a way that had nothing to do with the hot shower I'd just taken. Neither of us spoke, neither of us looked away. And in that moment, standing there in nothing but the charged air between us, I knew this wasn't over. For a long second, neither of us moved. The towel lay at my feet, a forgotten barrier between us. And the locker room suddenly felt too small, too quiet, the air thick with something I couldn't name but could feel deep in my chest. Reggie's eyes stayed locked on mine, dark and unreadable, but the shift in his expression was unmistakable. There was no awkward stammering, no hurried glance away. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his gaze steady, his jaw tightening just slightly as if he was weighing his next move carefully. I should have scrambled to grab the towel, should have broken eye contact and laughed it off. But I didn't, couldn't. Heat flooded my body, not from embarrassment but from the way he was looking at me, like he was seeing me. Really seeing me, and not just some random gym goer he happened to clean up after. The intensity in his gaze sent a shiver down my spine, and despite my better judgment, I stepped forward slightly, closing just an inch of the space between us. Reggie exhaled through his nose, his fingers tightening around the handle of his cleaning cart before he slowly let go. As if making a decision he knew he shouldn't be making. "Guess I walked in at the right time," he murmured, his voice lower, rougher than before. A nervous thrill shot through me, tightening in my stomach, making my skin prickle with anticipation. "Or the wrong time," I countered, though my voice came out quieter than I intended. Reggie's lips quirked in the ghost of a smirk, but there was no amusement in his expression, just something darker, heavier. He stepped forward, slow and controlled, his boots making soft, deliberate sounds against the tile. My pulse pounded in my ears, my body rooted in place, unwilling to move away even though my mind screamed that this was dangerous. That the door was still open, that at any moment someone could walk in. But I didn't care. I wanted this. Reggie stopped just in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that I could smell the faint mix of soap and sweat and something undeniably him. His eyes flickered down for the briefest second before meeting mine again, his expression unreadable but undeniably intense. "You're not moving," he observed quietly, his voice barely above a murmur. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Neither are you." The corner of his mouth twitched, but he didn't smile. Instead, he reached out, slow and deliberate, his fingers brushing against my wrist, a barely there touch that sent a spark straight through me. "Maybe," he murmured, his fingers grazing higher, lingering just below my elbow. "We don't want to." My breath caught in my throat. We were too close. The door was still open. The risk was too high. But I didn't pull away. And neither did he. The space between us disappeared in a slow, deliberate pull, like gravity had made its decision for us. Reggie's fingers ghosted up my arm, leaving a trail of heat in their wake, his touch rough from years of hard work, yet impossibly careful, as if he was memorizing every inch of skin beneath them. I should have been thinking about the risk, about the fact that the door was still open, about how anyone could walk in at any second. But all I could focus on was him, the way he moved, the way he held himself, the way his breath hitched just slightly when my hand found his waist in return. "You sure about this, Steve?" Reggie murmured, his voice quieter than before, almost hesitant despite the fire burning in his eyes. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I let my fingers press firmly against his side, my body leaning into his just enough to tell him that I wasn't going anywhere. His breath deepened at that, his hand shifting to my lower back, warm and solid, grounding me in the moment. I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding as I let my fingers explore, tracing the hem of his shirt, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath the fabric. He didn't stop me. If anything, his grip tightened just slightly, his muscles tensing beneath my touch. "This is crazy," I muttered, half laughing, half breathless. Reggie huffed out something that might have been a laugh, his forehead nearly brushing mine. "Probably." Neither of us moved, neither of us stopped. The air between us thickened, charged with something undeniable, something neither of us wanted to name just yet. The distant hum of the gym, the faint sound of music playing over the speakers. It all faded into background noise. And then, finally, he closed the last inch of space between us. It wasn't hurried, wasn't rushed. His lips met mine in a slow, deliberate kiss. A test, a question. I answered with a sigh, my body melting into his as my hand slid up his chest. Feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath my fingertips, Reggie groaned softly, deepening the kiss, his hand pressing against my lower back, pulling me closer until there was nothing left between us but heat and want. His other hand came up, cupping my jaw, tilting my head just enough to take control. And God, I let him. A distant noise, a locker slamming shut, footsteps echoing down the hall, snapped us both back to reality. We broke apart just enough to breathe, our foreheads still touching, our breathing uneven. "We should stop," Reggie whispered, but his grip on me didn't loosen. I exhaled shakily, my hands still fisted in his shirt. "We should." Neither of us moved, neither of us let go. And deep down we both knew we weren't stopping here. Not now, not ever. We stood there, breathless, bodies pressed close, both knowing we should take a step back, but neither of us willing to. The moment had swallowed us whole. And even as the sounds of the gym drifted back in, the occasional clang of weights, the distant murmur of a radio, neither of us broke away. Reggie's hand remained firm on my lower back. His grip possessive, protective, like he didn't want to let go. My fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, feeling the heat of his skin beneath, my pulse still hammering from everything that had just happened. His eyes met mine, searching, flickering with something between desire and hesitation. "What are we doing, Steve?" he murmured, his voice rough but softer than before. I swallowed hard, shaking my head slightly. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to stop." His jaw tensed at that, his fingers flexing against my back like he was waging a war within himself. "You sure?" Instead of answering, I reached up, sliding my fingers along the back of his neck, pulling him back down to me in a slow, deep kiss. He groaned softly against my lips, his hand tightening its hold on me, pressing me even closer as he kissed me back with just as much need. It wasn't rushed now. It wasn't just about the thrill or the danger anymore. It was something else, something neither of us had planned for. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads resting together, our breathing uneven, I could feel the shift between us. This wasn't just a moment stolen in the quiet of a locker room. This was something real. Reggie exhaled, his fingers trailing lightly down my spine before he finally, reluctantly, took a step back, his eyes still locked on mine. "Come back tomorrow," he said quietly. I smirked, tilting my head. "You trying to make sure I keep my gym membership?" His lips twitched, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. "I'm trying to make sure I see you again." My chest tightened at that. Just him telling me exactly what he wanted. I nodded, the answer coming easily. "I'll be here." He let out a slow breath. Then, without another word, turned and walked back toward his cart, his fingers brushing mine in the briefest, quietest promise as he passed. I stood there for a moment, feeling the cool air against my still warm skin, my heart still beating too fast, my lips still tingling from his. I had come here expecting nothing more than a workout. Instead, I had found something I wasn't ready to let go of. And as I grabbed my bag and walked out of the gym that night, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Whoa, right? I still get chills thinking about that night. It just goes to show you that you never know when love might come knocking, even in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life experiences, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me and helps me keep sharing these stories. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a similar experience or what you thought of Reggie. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.